Dr. Olivia Carter pulled her scrubs off, the fabric damp with the sweat of a 14-hour shift. The air in the parking lot of St. Augustine Medical Center was thick with the weight of a Florida summer, humid, suffocating, the kind of heat that clung to your skin and left you longing for an ice-cold drink. But after hours spent under the sterile, fluorescent lights of the operating room, Olivia welcomed the warmth. It reminded her she was still human. She exhaled, rolling the tension from her shoulders as she made her way toward her car. Her steps were slow, measured, exhaustion seeping into her every muscle. As the hospital doors slid shut behind her, the usual late-night scene unfolded. Nurses huddled in small groups, murmuring about the chaos of the interns lingering near the entrance, their scrubs still wrinkled from the night's work. "Get some rest, Dr. Carter," a nurse called, offering a tired but genuine smile. "We'd be lost without you," added an intern, his voice still buzzing with the nerves of a first-year resident. Olivia forced a smile, nodding as she reached for her keys. She had heard those words 100 times before. They used to mean something, used to remind her of the purpose that had driven her through grueling years of medical school, sleepless nights, and the weight of life-or-death decisions. But tonight, they felt empty, not because she didn't believe them, but because she was too tired to carry the weight of being needed. Tonight, she just wanted to be Olivia Carter, a 39-year-old woman in desperate need of a moment's peace. She reached for the car door, and then the sound of screeching tires shattered the night. The screech of tires cut through the thick night air, sharp and sudden, like a warning. Dr. Olivia Carter's heart jumped in her chest as two police cruisers swerved into the parking lot, their lights flashing but sirens silent. A ripple of unease spread through the lingering hospital staff. Conversations stopped, footsteps faltered. Even the warm hum of a Florida night seemed to still. Two officers stepped out, moving with the kind of rigid authority that made Olivia's stomach tighten. One was tall, broad-shouldered, his expression unreadable. The other, a woman, smaller but no less imposing. Their hands hovered near their holsters, not gripping, not drawing, but close enough to send a message. Olivia straightened. "Hey, what's going on?" Her voice was calm, but confusion edged her words. The male officer's gaze locked onto her. "Step away from the vehicle." For a moment, Olivia didn't move. The exhaustion from her shift clung to her like a second skin, dulling her reflexes. But something about the officer's tone sent a shiver down her spine. She glanced around. The parking lot, just moments ago filled with friendly chatter and tired smiles, had gone eerily silent. The nurse who had just wished her good night now looked frozen in place, eyes darting between Olivia and the officers. "This is my car," Olivia said, forcing steel into her voice. She had spent the last 14 hours holding scalpels, making decisions that determined whether someone lived or died. She was not about to be intimidated in her own hospital's parking lot. The female officer stepped closer. "We received a report of a stolen vehicle matching this description." Stolen, the word hit Olivia like a slap. She shook her head, reaching for her bag. "I work here. You can ask anyone inside." "ID, now." The command was sharp, cutting through the humid air. And suddenly, exhaustion wasn't the heaviest thing weighing on Olivia anymore. The night, once just thick with humidity, now felt suffocating. Dr. Olivia Carter dug through her bag, fingers trembling not from fear, but from the sheer absurdity of the situation. Her hospital ID was buried beneath a pile of patient notes, pens, and the granola bar she never got around to eating. "Come on," she muttered under her breath, willing her fingers to work faster. The male officer took a step closer. "We're not asking again," he warned, his voice dropping to a level that sent ice trickling down her spine. Before she could pull out her badge, his hand shot forward, clamping onto her arm. "Excuse me," Olivia snapped, instinctively yanking back. The reaction was instant. The officer's grip tightened, and before she could even process what was happening, she was spun around and shoved against the hood of her own car. A gasp rippled through the parking lot. "Dr. Carter?" A voice, young and shocked, cut through the thick air. Olivia barely had time to register who had spoken before the pressure of the officer's hand pinned her down. "Are you serious?" Another voice, louder, angrier. The scene had shifted. Where there was once only silence, now there was movement. People were stepping forward, nurses, interns, orderlies, all staring at the absurdity unfolding in front of them. The young intern from earlier, still in his scrubs, was the first to move. His voice cracked as he shouted, "She's the head of surgery. What the hell are you doing?" The officers froze. A heartbeat passed, two. And then, just like that, the tension snapped. The hands holding Olivia eased, hesitant now, uncertain. The realization hit like a slow-moving freight train. They had just manhandled the most respected surgeon at St. Augustine Medical Center. And they had done it in front of a crowd. For a long, heavy moment, no one moved. Dr. Olivia Carter stood with her back straight, her breath shallow but controlled, as the officers hesitated. The weight of their mistake was beginning to settle over them like a dense fog. The crowd of medical staff had grown, their whispers turning into sharp murmurs, their disbelief bleeding into outrage. The male officer cleared his throat, his grip loosening completely now. "We received a call about a stolen vehicle." "A stolen vehicle," Olivia cut in, her voice ice cold. She turned slowly, her hands clenching at her sides. "And I just happened to match the description. No questions asked, no confirmation. Just straight to throwing me on the hood of my own damn car." The female officer's mouth opened as if to respond, but she hesitated. Because what could she say? The reality was written all over the scene. The young intern Jake, if Olivia remembered correctly, was still standing there, his jaw tight with anger. "You didn't even ask who she was," he said, his voice rising. "You saw her, and you assumed." The murmurs in the crowd turned into something stronger: frustration, disbelief, an undercurrent of something too long ignored. Olivia let out a slow breath, steadying herself. She had spent years holding scalpels, making impossible decisions, and carrying the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. But now she felt something else. A realization clawed at the edges of her exhaustion. This wasn't just about her. This was about every single person who had ever been in her shoes, who had been doubted, questioned, underestimated, or outright disrespected because of who they were. Her jaw tightened. She met the officer's gaze, her voice steady but sharp. "You didn't do your job tonight," she said, her words cutting through the humid night air. "You didn't bother to ask. You didn't bother to think. You just saw someone who looked like a suspect and decided that was enough." Silence. And for the first time since the officers arrived, they finally seemed to understand. This wasn't just a mistake, this was a pattern. The silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating, as if the entire night had paused to see what would happen next. The officers shifted awkwardly, their earlier confidence now replaced with something resembling unease. The flashing lights from their cruisers reflected in their faces, highlighting the discomfort they refused to put into words. Dr. Olivia Carter let the moment linger. She wanted them to feel it, the weight of their mistake, the stares burning into their backs, the undeniable truth that everyone here had just witnessed something wrong. But she also knew how this usually ended: a half-hearted apology, a vague excuse, and then nothing. Not this time. A voice cut through the silence, sharp and steady. "You don't get it." It was Karen, one of Olivia's closest colleagues, and a no-nonsense trauma nurse who had seen too much to stay quiet. She stepped forward, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. "She's not just anyone. She's the head of surgery. You should have known that, but you didn't care. You didn't ask. You just acted." The female officer exhaled, looking away for the first time. The male officer clenched his jaw. "Look," he started, but Olivia raised a hand, stopping him cold. "You don't get to explain this away," she said, her voice dangerously calm. "Not to me, not to them." She gestured to the growing crowd. "Not to anyone who has ever been in my position, wondering why they're being treated like a suspect instead of a human being." The crowd murmured in agreement. Olivia wasn't naive. She knew change didn't come easy. But she also knew she had a choice: let this moment fade into another forgotten injustice, or stand her ground. Karen met her gaze, her voice softer now, but still unshakable. You have to say something, Olivia. People need to hear this. They need to hear you. For the first time that night, Olivia felt the exhaustion slip away, replaced by something heavier, something with purpose. She straightened her shoulders. Then let's make sure they do. By the next morning, the story had already started to spread. Dr. Olivia Carter barely had time to breathe before her phone exploded with notifications, texts from colleagues, missed calls from unknown numbers, and a flood of messages that made it clear this wasn't going away. She scrolled through her phone, her heartbeat steady, but her mind racing. Local news outlets had picked up the story. Social media was ablaze. People were talking, sharing, arguing. Respected surgeon detained by police in hospital parking lot mistaken for car thief. Head of surgery at St. Augustine Medical Center confronts racial profiling. Olivia exhaled, tossing her phone onto her desk. She had spent her entire career making precise, calculated decisions under pressure, holding a scalpel, making the right call when lives were at stake. But this felt different. A knock at her office door made her look up. Karen stepped inside, arms crossed, eyes filled with the kind of sharp determination Olivia had come to admire. The news outlets are calling nonstop. They want interviews. They want your side of the story. Olivia let out a low chuckle, though there was no humor in it. I thought I was just standing up for myself last night. Karen arched a brow. Well, now you're standing up for a hell of a lot more people than just yourself. Olivia leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples. And it's getting ugly, isn't it? Karen didn't sugarcoat it. Oh yeah. There are people supporting you, big names in the medical field, activists, even patients. But then you've got the others, the ones calling you a troublemaker, saying you're overreacting. Olivia's jaw tightened. Troublemaker. A woman speaks up, and she's a problem. A man does it, and he's a leader. She had spent years proving she belonged in this field, in this hospital, in the very life she had built. And now, she had a choice. Set up the interviews, Olivia said, her voice steady. Karen smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. The storm hit faster than Olivia expected. 1 minute, she was preparing for her first interview, rehearsing her words in the mirror of her office, steadying herself for the inevitable wave of attention. The next, her door swung open without so much as a knock. Dr. Mark Reynolds, senior surgeon, hospital board member, and someone Olivia had once considered, and ally stepped inside, his usual easygoing demeanor replaced by something colder. Olivia, he started, closing the door behind him. We need to talk. She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. Let me guess, this is about my little incident in the parking lot. Reynolds let out a sharp breath. You know, the board is concerned. The hospital's image is at stake. Olivia scoffed. Funny, I thought the hospital was supposed to care about its people, not just its reputation. He pinched the bridge of his nose, as if she were the one being unreasonable. Look, I'm trying to help you here. There's been pressure from the top. They're talking about reassigning you, taking you off high-profile cases. The words hit like a slap. For a moment, Olivia just stared at him. She had poured everything into this hospital, her time, her talent, her literal blood, sweat, and tears. And now, they wanted to sideline her. Reassign me? For what? Speaking the truth. Reynolds hesitated, then said in a quieter voice, they're worried about patient trust, about hospital relations. Olivia's temper flared. Oh, so I'm the problem? Not the officers who threw me against my car for no damn reason? Not the system that made them think I didn't belong here? Reynolds shifted uncomfortably. I'm just telling you how it is. Olivia let out a slow breath, standing up. Then let me tell you how it is, Mark. I'm not going anywhere. He studied her, and for a brief second, something flickered in his eyes, respect. Or just the realization that Olivia Carter was not someone they could silence. Just be careful, he muttered before leaving. Olivia watched the door close behind him, her pulse steady, her decision firm. They wanted her to back down. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Dr. Olivia Carter had faced high-pressure situations before life-or-death calls in the OR, patients coding on the table, decisions that couldn't afford hesitation. But this was a different kind of battle. The hospital board was circling like vultures, waiting for her to fold, waiting for her to apologize, to smooth things over, to play nice. They had no idea who they were dealing with. She sat at her desk, her fingers drumming against the wood as she stared at the emails flooding in. Some from reporters, some from people she had never met, patients, strangers, doctors from other hospitals. "Dr. Carter, I was in your OR 5 years ago. You saved my life. I stand with you. Don't back down. We need voices like yours. I hope they fire you. You're a disgrace to this profession." Ah, there it was. The other side of the equation, the trolls. The ones who saw her as a problem, a disruptor, a woman who didn't know her place. She leaned back in her chair, exhaling slowly. The knock at her door was soft but firm. Corinne stepped inside, a knowing smile on her face. "You busy, or are you just sitting here plotting your next move?" Olivia smirked, a little of both. Corinne held up her phone. "I thought you might want to see this." She tapped the screen and turned it around. It was a video from last night, the hospital parking lot. The moment the officers shoved Olivia against her car. But it wasn't just that moment, it was the reaction. The nurses stepping forward, the interns looking outraged. The sheer disbelief and anger on the faces of the people who had worked beside her for years. It had gone viral. Olivia let out a slow, knowing breath. She wasn't alone in this, and now the whole world knew it too. The video had done something Olivia never expected. It forced people to pay attention. Not just the public, not just the media. The hospital board. A meeting was called, fast. By the time Olivia walked into the boardroom, she could feel the tension thick in the air, pressing against her like the humidity outside. The long, polished table was filled with executives, administrators, and department heads, all of them looking at her like she was both the problem and the solution. Mark Reynolds sat near the head of the table, his expression unreadable. Across from him was Linda Baxter, the hospital's chief administrator, a woman known for her ability to spin any crisis into a PR win. "Dr. Carter," she began, her voice smooth, practiced. "We want to address the recent situation." Olivia didn't sit. She crossed her arms. "You mean the part where your chief of surgery was thrown against your car in front of half the hospital staff?" A few of the board members shifted uncomfortably. Linda cleared her throat. "We understand the gravity of the situation, and we want to assure you we are taking steps." Olivia cut her off. "Steps to do what? To make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else? Or just to clean up the hospital's image?" Silence. Then, a voice from the far end of the table. "We've been reviewing policies. We recognize that we need to do more. We want to implement anti-bias training for staff and partner with the local community on outreach programs," one of the board members said. For the first time since stepping into the room, Olivia felt a flicker of something close to hope. She had expected resistance, expected them to try and silence her, but maybe, just maybe, things were shifting. She took a slow breath. "I'm not here to make this look good for you," she said, voice steady. "I'm here because this has to change. For me, for my colleagues, for every patient who walks through these doors." Mark Reynolds nodded slightly, like he knew there was no fighting this. Linda exhaled. "Then let's talk about how to make that happen." And just like that, Olivia realized something. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about making sure the next person wouldn't have to fight this battle alone. The hospital didn't change overnight. Policies weren't rewritten in a single meeting, and centuries of bias didn't disappear just because a viral video forced people to acknowledge it. But something shifted. Dr. Olivia Carter could feel it in the way people looked at her, not with pity, not with discomfort, but with something else. Recognition, respect. It wasn't just her fight anymore. Over the next few weeks, conversations spread beyond the walls of St. Augustine Medical Center. Other hospitals started looking into their own policies, their own blind spots. The incident sparked debates on national news, and medical boards across the country were forced to acknowledge what had always been there unspoken, ignored, but never truly gone. Change wasn't just happening in emails or boardrooms. It was in the quiet moments, too. Like when a young black nurse pulled Olivia aside and whispered, "Thank you for standing up. We've all felt it, you just said it out loud." Or when a senior doctor, a man who had barely acknowledged her existence before, stopped her in the hallway and admitted, "I didn't get it before. I do now," and most of all, in the stack of letters that kept arriving at her office. One stood out. "Dr. Carter, I don't know you, but I know what it's like to be seen as a threat before I'm seen as a person. You didn't just speak for yourself, you spoke for all of us." She sat in her office, turning the letter over in her hands. This fight wasn't over, but she had done something that mattered. She had spoken up, and for the first time in a long time. The world had listened.